So I'm going to do this starting off on a very basic level. Um, Louis, I'm with Louis Brown, a partner at Consors and Conway.
Yes, that's correct.
And Louis, tell me a little bit about your firm and what it does and what you do.
Well, we are a law firm and a lobby firm in Sacramento, California. Represent a broad cross section of interests, and we've represented the California Advanced Biofuels Alliance and the California or the Clean Fuels Alliance, better or formerly known as National Biodiesel Board, for probably close to 15 years in California. So I've been engaged on the renewable fuel issues really from the start as California passed various legislation regulation in this area.
Terrific. And you joined us for a panel discussion at our Clean Biofuels Conference in Albany. It was called Pathways to a Clean Future. And you sat on a panel, environmental equity, transportation, and heating fuels, how the use of biomass-based diesel is contributing to the health and wellness in the United States, and specifically in environmental justice and disadvantaged communities. First off, let me ask, please summarize your comments from when you first spoke at the panel regarding this subject.
The way to summarize it best is that we know that the long-term goal and long-term climate change policies are seeking electrification. California has already moved forward in looking to ban the sale of new gasoline cars by 2035. They're now looking to do the same in heavy duty and medium duty vehicles as well. But those are long-term goals. I mean, 2035 is a long ways out there. And frankly, that goal does nothing today to help health issues, air quality issues that we now see and can address. And so one of the things that we've been talking about is, especially with renewable diesel and biodiesel, those are drop-in replacements for petroleum diesel. They have great carbon intensity scores. They lower greenhouse gas emissions. They lower particulate matter. They help reduce the NOx issues and other air quality issues that environmental justice communities are dealing with today. So we don't want to distract from the long-term goals, but what we should be doing is trying to reduce carbon today and improve the health benefits of these communities today. And you can do that by transitioning the fuel. That doesn't require a truck driver to go out and buy a new vehicle. They just simply switch their fuel. And by switching the fuel today, you increase the health benefits. And we just think that that needs to be part of the conversation. It's helpful for the environmental justice communities. It's helpful for our carbon goals.
And what are the legal hurdles, if any, that prevent conversions or companies from the private sector or even the public sector to consider when transitioning to these cleaner fuel options?
No legal options. It's really just the will to do it. And frankly, it's just getting people to focus on it. People have been focused on, and I don't mean to demean it, but the shiny light of electrification. And they've not been able to focus on what can we do today. So it's really bringing policymakers around to say, look, you need, and we all do it. We do it in our everyday life. We need short, medium, and long-term goals. The long-term goal everyone seems to be agreed on. Let's focus on the short-term goal of cleaning the air in the transportation sector, which is the largest emitter of air pollution. And we can do that by these renewable fuels. So it's really just getting people to focus on it. The demand, as the demand goes, the supply will be there. And we already see significant growth in the renewable diesel market and the biodiesel market. So it's really, Ralph, I think just a matter of focus. electrification is just a whole lot easier to focus on than talking about, renewable diesel.
What kind of pushback do you often get? What's the line that people give you a lot of times when you start talking about these alternatives?
I think the line is that, they simply think it doesn't do enough. And it's the proverbial letting the perfect get in the way of the good, and making progress. We're not going to get to the finish line on step one. And so, there are other issues that people bring up. There are concerns about feedstocks. As we start to grow this market of biodiesel and renewable diesel, what does that mean in these renewable feedstocks that we use, whether it be soybean, whether it be animal fats and tallow? The biodiesel industry in California, utilizes yellow grease, which is the grease out of the backside of a restaurant. So what does it mean there? But again, I think those are questions that the market will resolve if we start to see the demand increase as a result of policy.
Where does New York State stand in terms of embracing these clean energy alternatives that we can seize on now?
Well, from the presentations I saw, it looks like the policy and the legislation is starting to take shape to move in that direction.
Mm-hmm.
But they also seem to be addressing, and I think, and asking the right questions, especially when it comes to electrification. Are the manufacturers going to be able to meet that? Is the grid going to be able to supply the power that's necessary? And in the meantime, what do we do about this pollution? So from what I've heard, from what I've seen in some of the legislation that's being drafted, it looks like they're moving in the right direction to adopt something that's similar to the low carbon fuel standard that's been in California for a number of years. It's not a top-down mandate. It's an incentive-based program that basically forces the industry to go out and innovate. And the fuels coming into the market that have the lowest carbon score get higher credit prices and greater opportunities to compete in this. And we've seen it be very successful in California. And I think New York seems to be heading in that direction as well.
Are policymakers hard to convince of the equity benefits?
Not once they start to see the numbers. And, as we start to show things, for example, there's a study that we call it the Trinity study that was done in partnership with the American Lung Association that really highlights some of the most polluted areas in the country. And in California, it focused on the ports, specifically the Port of Long Beach and the Port of Los Angeles, where, frankly, is the gateway to a lot of the commerce that's happening now. And that study showed just immediate reductions in health concerns and issues. And I think once policymakers start to see the benefits that happen from the air pollution and the health, and they combine that with the economic incentives that come from a low carbon fuel standard, it really kind of becomes a no-brainer.
We've been talking a lot about how this applies to transportation, but it also applies to heating fuels, right?
Yeah, it does. And I'll have to admit that that's an issue that I'm a little less knowledgeable on, only because we don't utilize heating oil in California like they do in the Northeast. I mean, it just really doesn't get that cold out here. So, but it is definitely another source that you have to look at. Is it, especially in the Northeast, where heating oil, frankly, can be fairly dirty fuel. And if you can transition that to a renewable fuel that has better health benefits, frankly, it seems to go hand in hand with the discussion that we're having about when you're talking about transportation.
Are there any federal regulatory hurdles or concerns at all that would slow down the implementation of biomass-based diesel fuel, or the same for heating fuel? Are there any federal guardrails in this?
No real hurdles. I mean, in fact, I think the federal government has looked to really build the industry. The renewable fuel standard, the credits that they provide for renewable fuels is there. You know, I think it does come back to a more of a state level. I don't know that we'll see a federal low carbon fuel standard at any time soon. You know, Congress moves slowly, and so they can focus on that big picture of like a renewable fuel standard. But I think it really comes down to, at least in the near future, what individual states can provide. And we've seen it. You know, we've seen various states in the Midwest do blend mandates where certain percentages of fuel are renewable. The West Coast is now pretty much moved entirely to a low carbon fuel standard. You got California and Oregon and British Columbia that have already implemented one. Washington is not far behind. And so I think this movement is going to happen from the coasts. And once we see New York come on board, maybe once we see New York and we see the West Coast come on, we'll see a little bit more movement at the congressional level.
This has been really very interesting, very fascinating to catch up on this again. What are next steps to see some immediate action taken in encouraging the public and private sector to adopt, biomass-based fuels?
Well, I think having New York and the Northeast states come on board would be amazing for it. You just start to look at the percentage of the population then would be, impacted in a positive way of having these low carbon fuels. And with that, we see the corresponding growth in production. And I think it's just all moving in the right direction at this time.
Louis, this has been really great. Is there something that you wanted to include in this discussion, or a question I didn't ask that you wanted me to?
No, I think the only thing I would, conclude with, Ralph, is how we started it. What we've seen in California is that as the low carbon fuel standard came in place, it was biomass-based diesel, it was renewable diesel that generated the credits that and really helped drive the carbon intensity scores lower. And in doing that, it's created revenues for the electric policies that we have in California. And it's really, been a success story for us as we try to accomplish our climate goals, but also then address air pollution issues.